Estelle, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And now you guys decided to do, I suppose one could call it a snap survey on Twitter. What did you decide to ask, and what were the numbers that came back to you?
Yes, so we asked our millennial audience if they are planning to or have already moved back home with their parents following lockdown, and a whopping 64% said yes, they did. I think it's not a surprise. We know that it's very difficult for young people to save. We've got a very low savings profile, and rent is as essential as it is one of the first expenses to go. If we look at the tenant profile network that actually measures tenancy health in South Africa, we know that there was about a third of South Africans that couldn't pay full rent in April already when lockdown started, and that number is actually climbing.
And these were, of course, also findings that have been reflected internationally as well. I mean, in the statement you sent out, you quote the findings of a Pew Research Center survey, which recently announced findings in the US into urban dwellings that for the first time ever, most 18 to 34-year-olds now live at home with their parents. Now, obviously, the socioeconomic setup in the US is very different to South Africa, but what that grouping does have in common is that they live quite close to the line, as it were, in terms of expenses. If you can, you've got a place on your own, or you share with a friend or somebody that you've advertised a room to. And you guys have seen that knock-on effect in your rental property listings as well. What did that tell you?
Yes, so at the moment we've got over 40,000 residential listings, which is quite high, and it is growing. There's also a growing number of houses for sale. There is growing demand for a house share or even private rooms for rent in homes as people are trying to stretch their income. And I think the same can be said for industrial and retail properties. And we can only assume that is because some businesses have unfortunately had to close their doors, or they are looking for cheaper rent elsewhere.
Your organization is also known to be a place that people can go to if they want to get rid of or pass on, as it were, goods in their house that they no longer have a need for, or if they want the new PlayStation or they can no longer afford the PlayStation or Xbox box that they currently have, they decide to sacrifice that to the Gumtree lords, as it were. Have you seen a spike in those kinds of things going up for sale as well?
Definitely. We're always pretty active, but we've seen a spike in the last couple of months of what we would call the high value items. So heirloom antiques, jewelry, wow, expensive electronics, wedding rings. People are really, I think, desperate and hoping to cash in. We also have a huge number of recruitment clients that use the platform, and some of them have said that applications for job vacancies are up 400% in some cases.
That is a massive number. Now, speaking about jobs, what you've also noticed, and I suppose one can look at it in the positive light, I suppose, when people perhaps have seen this is the way they need to go, or they've got no other choice but to try and start their own business or try and tap into an entrepreneurial sector. You've seen an increase or an uptick in entrepreneurial activity on your platform as well.
Yes, and I think that is the silver lining. I think the millennials grew up in the startup culture. I think they're not waiting for a bailout. They're being extremely proactive. During the height of lockdown, we actually started an online services category because there were so many people teaching exercise classes and music classes and language classes and offering tutoring and support. We've also seen a whole bunch of new services started up by entrepreneurial young people. I think my favorite is the queuing system. So you can actually pay someone to stand in those long queues at the traffic department now, which is great. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovative new businesses emerge out of this as well.
Well, that certainly is an interesting way to look at it. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Estelle Nagel. She's the Gumtree SA's brand marketing manager, joining us live there from Cape Town. And quite interesting that they ended off their statement by saying these brave new young entrepreneurs that they've seen an increase in terms of their survey will be in good company. The likes of Google, Apple, Microsoft and Amazon, all multi-billion-dollar companies, all started out in their founders' parents' garages and I suppose kitchens as well.